play rough? Okay. No. Say hello to my little friend!
Scarface, 1983, was once considered a Hollywood flop, torn apart by critics, slapped with an X rating like a pornographic snuff film, and nearly buried forever in darkness. On release day, its box office numbers barely scraped enough to cover the budget. But from those ashes, the film roared back to life, transforming into an immortal monument of cinema, seared into pop culture forever with the image of Tony Montana, the arrogant Cuban immigrant standing defiantly in a sea of blood and fire, screaming, "Say hello to my little friend," before unleashing his iconic M16. Few know that behind this dazzling glory lies a trail of scandalous, bizarre truths. Al Pacino was literally burned by a rifle on set, carrying the scars for life. Michelle Pfeiffer nearly lost her role because Pacino dismissed her as not good enough. And Saddam Hussein himself drew inspiration from Tony Montana to name a money laundering front company. The making of Scarface was a chaotic maze where violence, ambition, tragedy, and surreal secrets collided. So what turned a movie once shunned into the Bible of pop culture, worshipped for more than 4 decades? And why does Tony Montana still haunt millions like a ghost that refuses to die? Let's peel back the curtain on 20 shocking facts about Scarface right now. Number 20. The mysterious disappearance of an actress. Tammy Lynn Leppert, the blonde in the blue bikini briefly seen at the Sunray Motel in Scarface, was once tipped to be Hollywood's next star. Crowned hundreds of times as a child beauty queen, Tammy entered film with dazzling looks and burning ambition. But the silver screen's glow quickly turned into a nightmare. Just months after appearing in Brian De Palma's crime masterpiece, Tammy vanished without a trace, leaving behind one of Hollywood's eeriest disappearances. Before she disappeared, Tammy showed disturbing signs of paranoia, claiming someone was threatening her. Friends recalled her stumbling home from a party, wide-eyed and terrified, convinced people were trying to kill her. She refused to eat, fearing poison, always glancing over her shoulder. Doctors insisted she was healthy, but her family swore something broke in her after witnessing a brutally violent scene during Scarface filming. She wasn't herself anymore, her mother confessed. It was as if she carried a secret too terrifying to share. On July 6, 1983, Tammy left home with a male friend saying she was heading to Cocoa Beach to relax. After an argument, he left her near the Glass Bank building. She was never seen again. She wore a floral blouse, blue denim skirt, and carried a grey purse. An ordinary look, but the last anyone would ever see of her. This chilling tragedy is only the beginning. Let's dive into even darker truths. Number 19. Al Pacino. Nearly died filming. Al Pacino became a legend, but his blazing performance didn't come free. It was bought with blood, sweat, and horrifying injuries on the set of Scarface. Think of the film's most unforgettable moment. Tony Montana, standing atop a mountain of cocaine, clutching an M16, screaming, "Say hello to my little friend," before unleashing a storm of bullets. A scene that defined the movie. But behind the camera, Pacino was paying a terrible price. In a fevered burst of method acting, Pacino grabbed the rifle barrel after continuous fire, not realizing it was glowing hot. "My hand stuck to it like someone had poured glue all over me," Pacino recalled with a shudder. The second-degree burn blistered his hand, filling the set with the smell of seared flesh. The agony nearly knocked him out, forcing production to shut down for 2 full weeks and racking up tens of thousands in costs. The scar on his left hand remains, a permanent reminder of the day he lived and bled as Tony Montana. But hell wasn't done with him. During a heated fight scene, Michelle Pfeiffer, only 25 and too deep in character, hurled a shard of broken glass straight at Pacino. It sliced into his arm like a razor, sending blood gushing. He needed stitches, adding another scar to his battered body. Pfeiffer was left trembling and in tears. "I just hurt my idol, for real!" That scene became haunting, on and off screen. The wounds weren't just physical. To embody Tony Montana, Pacino locked himself inside the character, memorizing every line, living like Tony. But the mental toll was devastating. Constant inhaling of powdered milk, the stand-in for cocaine, scarred his nasal passages permanently. Yet, despite the pain, Pacino smiled. Tony Montana is my favorite role, even more than Michael Corleone in The Godfather. The question is, were those wounds worth the immortality of the performance? You decide. But beware, Scarface's secrets only get darker from here. Number 18. Pacino rejected. Michelle Pfeiffer as Elvira. Here's a shocking truth. Al Pacino, the star himself, fought against casting Michelle Pfeiffer as Elvira. Pacino thought she was too green, too inexperienced to portray Tony Montana's icy wife. In his mind, Pfeiffer didn't fit the image of Elvira at all. He even suggested Glenn Close instead, determined to protect the role as he envisioned it. But producer Martin Bregman saw something in Pfeiffer, a striking, dangerous allure. He fought for her relentlessly, convincing director Brian De Palma to give her a shot. Pacino still doubted her, until the audition. From her piercing eyes to her aloof elegance, Pfeiffer radiated the cold fragility Elvira demanded. The first days of shooting were brutal. Pacino's intensity, his perfectionism, reduced Pfeiffer to tears at night. She nearly broke. During one tense moment, an on-set mishap even left Pacino injured. But that incident became a turning point. Pacino recognized her grit, her talent, and finally accepted her as Elvira. What do you think? Was Pfeiffer the perfect Elvira? Number 17. The chainsaw scene was inspired by real crimes. One of Scarface's most horrifying sequences, the chainsaw scene, wasn't pure invention. Screenwriter Oliver Stone based it on real stories from Miami-Dade police about Colombian cartel executions. Ganglords, they said, had actually used chainsaws to butcher rivals, sometimes even entire families, just to spread terror. Stone turned those grisly tales into cinematic nightmare fuel. Director Brian De Palma, instead of showing gore outright, used sound, shadow, and suggestion. The buzzing roar of the chainsaw, the splattering blood just off-screen. It forced audiences to imagine something even more gruesome than reality. That scene became a lightning rod of controversy, proof that Scarface was unafraid to push cinema into raw, terrifying territory. Number 16. Martin Scorsese didn't believe it would work. When Scarface premiered, it wasn't just critics who recoiled. Even Hollywood's most respected filmmakers saw doom. At the premiere, director Martin Scorsese pulled aside Stephen Bauer, who played Manny Ribera, and warned him, "You guys were great, but be ready. Hollywood's gonna hate this movie." When Bauer asked why, Scorsese whispered, "Because it's about them." Scarface's message, blind ambition and the true cost of the American dream, cut too close to home. Tony Montana's rise and fall mirrored the reality of 1980s Hollywood itself, a world drowning in cocaine and corruption. Scorsese, an expert in exploring society's dark underbelly, saw that the film wasn't just crime drama, it was a brutal indictment of the very culture it was released into. Though lambasted at first, Scarface found salvation on home video, building a cult following that turned it into an icon of cinema. And in the end, Scorsese was proven dead wrong. Number 15. The grueling transformation into Tony Montana. To become Tony Montana, the infamous Cuban gangster of Scarface, Al Pacino embarked on a brutal, almost insane journey of preparation, the kind few actors would dare attempt. Unlike others who drew inspiration from real-life mobsters or classic on-screen gangsters, Pacino took an unexpected detour. He studied Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice, 1982. In an interview, Pacino admitted, "I was overwhelmed by the way Meryl Streep embodied someone from another country, another world. She was fearless, fierce, and lived and died with her character. I knew that to become Tony Montana, I had to go all in like that." It wasn't by chance he turned to Streep. In Sophie's Choice, Streep portrayed Sophie, a Polish immigrant scarred by war and tormented by impossible choices. Her voice, her grief, her haunted past etched into every glance. All of it showed Pacino how an actor could fully live inside a character. And Tony Montana too demanded that same brutality, pain, and desperate will to survive. Pacino began training his body and mind like a fighter preparing for a death match. He studied Spanish with a dialect coach, drilled pronunciation endlessly, and leaned on co-star Stephen Bauer for extra tutoring. On set, Pacino forbade the crew from speaking English to him, forcing his brain to think like a real Cuban. But he didn't stop there. To move and fight like a street predator, Pacino plunged into close combat training. Knife fighting, lethal strikes, the rhythm of killers. He even sparred with boxing legend Roberto Duran, famous for his hands of stone. Every stance, every glare, every step was sharpened until Pacino no longer played a gangster. He became one. The result? Tony Montana wasn't just a role. He was the living embodiment of method acting pushed to its breaking point. Pacino proved the terrifying price an actor would pay to turn himself into an immortal cinematic icon. Number 14. Steven Spielberg directed a scene in the film. Here's a shocking little gem. During one of Scarface's most intense sequences, Steven Spielberg suddenly appeared on set. And he didn't just drop by as a curious guest. He was handed the camera and directed a shot himself. It was a fleeting but electrifying moment. Spielberg executed a low-angle shot of Sosa's mercenaries hooking their grappling lines and climbing the walls of Tony Montana's mansion. That brief camera movement dripped with tension, heralding the blood-soaked storm about to explode inside the cocaine-filled fortress. What makes this truth even wilder is that Spielberg never left a signature. He took no credit, no fee, and remained silent, ensuring all the glory went to Brian De Palma. This hidden contribution only came to light years later, stunning the film industry. For decades, everyone thought Scarface was only De Palma's creation. But behind the smoke and gunfire lurked the silent hand of Spielberg. Do you have a favourite Spielberg film? Share it with us. But for now, let's move on to the next twisted fact. Number 13. The bloody war with the censors. From the moment it was born, Scarface was slapped with the MPAA's death sentence, an X rating, the same rating reserved for pornography or ultra-violent shock films. With 226 F-bombs and executions that rattled the soul, Scarface was branded pornographic violence. Theatres flinched, advertisers backed out. Brian De Palma was forced to cut it 3 times, only to be met with the same cold verdict: X. Furious, he declared he would cut nothing more. In a gamble of madness, De Palma released the uncut version anyway, the very cut audiences thought they would never see. Years later, he confessed, "What you saw was the bloodiest X-rated film ever screened." The war peaked on November 8, 1983. Universal and De Palma appealed the MPAA's decision. 20 outsiders, from critic Roger Ebert to Miami police officers, were summoned to weigh in. The result? 17-3 in De Palma's favour. Scarface was cleared to release with an R rating. Yet De Palma still refused to compromise. He removed only a single detail, the shot of a chainsaw tearing into flesh, and left everything else intact. It wasn't just a victory, it was a manifesto. Cinema must be free, even if it leaves audiences paralysed in horror. The violence of Scarface remains seared into memory. At the Sunray Motel, Hector the Toad ties Angel to a shower pole, firing up a chainsaw. The guttural buzz, blood splattering Tony's face, muffled screams choking the air. De Palma never shows the blade meet flesh, but that absence made the scene a waking nightmare. In Babylon Club, Tony narrowly survives as brains splatter across a glass bar. Omar Suarez plummets from a helicopter, a chilling display of underworld cruelty. And Frank Lopez's cold execution by silencer was just a warm-up sketch for the full painting of blood to come. At last came the inferno, Tony's mansion. Buried in a mountain of cocaine, He bellows the immortal line and unleashes his M16 with grenade launcher. Bodies fly, blood floods the marble stairs. Tony takes dozens of bullets, still roaring at death until he crashes into the pool. Above him, the glowing words, "The world is yours," shine like a bitter eulogy for the shattered American dream. Critics initially savaged it. Pauline Kael sneered it was hollow. The Cuban community in Miami erupted in outrage, but VHS resurrected it. From American living rooms to mafia hideouts, from the lyrics of the notorious B.I.G. to the ambition of P. Diddy, Tony Montana became the ultimate rebel idol. 4 decades on, Scarface stands tall, not just for its gore, violence, or cocaine, but for the defiance of a director who dared to spit in the face of the system. Brian De Palma proved that to pierce the human soul, cinema sometimes has to cross the line, bleed, and terrify. That audacity transformed Scarface into a deathless legacy, written in blood, sweat, and the nightmare of Tony Montana. Number 12. Saddam Hussein's family were Scarface fanatics. Among declassified post-war files, one bizarre truth emerges. Saddam Hussein's family were rabid Scarface fans. It's said that after drunken parties, Saddam and his 2 sons, Uday and Qusay, would sit before a massive screen, devouring Tony Montana's every line as if seeing their own reflections in Hollywood's bloody mirror. The obsession went far beyond casual viewing. One of Saddam's money laundering companies was named Montana Management, the exact same company Tony Montana used in the film to clean his drug money. This wasn't parody. Montana Management existed on international records, even holding vast shares in French publishing giant Hachette. It was living proof Saddam had adopted the Tony Montana formula as financial strategy, injecting Hollywood's violent language into the machinery of dictatorship. In Saddam's palaces, Scarface tapes and DVDs were preserved like treasure. The line, "The world is yours," symbol of boundless ambition, was rumoured to hang somewhere in his entertainment room, mirroring the tyrant's own dream of Gulf domination. His son Uday, notorious for cruelty, was said to model himself after Tony Montana. Flashy clothes, drowning in cocaine and orgiastic parties, quenching his thirst with blood as if it were champagne. The story turned even darker when US media reported that, during the search of Saddam's palaces, American troops found him entranced before a massive plasma screen. Early rumours said he was watching Pretty Woman, but investigators were far more interested in the evidence of Scarface, the tapes, the DVDs, and the incriminating name of Montana Management. The coincidences piled too high. It exposed a chilling truth. Scarface wasn't just a movie, it was a manual for power in Saddam Hussein's world. And that's not the only dark legacy Scarface carries. Number 11. The film was not shot in Miami. Although it is considered one of the greatest gangster classics, few know that most of the film was not actually shot in Miami, the very city where the story takes place. From the moment the project was announced in 1982, the Cuban community in Miami launched fierce opposition, claiming the movie would portray Cubans negatively and harm the city's tourism industry. Many community leaders organised protests and spoke out against the film, arguing it would reinforce harmful stereotypes about Cuban immigrants. Some even warned that the film would damage the reputation of Cubans in the United States. Ultimately, the Miami Tourism Board refused to grant filming permits, fearing that the movie's themes of drugs and crime would tarnish the city's image. As a result, the production was forced to move most of the filming to Los Angeles and other locations in California. Only a handful of scenes were shot in Miami, including the infamous chainsaw sequence on Ocean Drive and one at the Fontainebleau Miami Beach Hotel. These Miami sequences were mostly filmed by a second unit, while the key set pieces, such as Tony Montana's mansion, were shot at El Ferradis in Santa Barbara, California. Number 10. Robert De Niro turned down the role of Tony Montana. Before Al Pacino became the legendary Cuban gangster Tony Montana in Scarface, 1983, The role had been considered for none other than Robert De Niro, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. De Niro was offered the chance to play Tony, but turned it down, an act that opened the door for Pacino. This casting shift not only changed the fate of the film, but also reshaped Pacino's career, transforming him into an icon of his generation. According to credible sources, De Niro and Pacino even discussed Scarface one evening in New York. De Niro allegedly urged Pacino, "If you don't do it, I will." That statement served both as a warning and a spark that pushed Pacino to embrace the role. He later recalled, "I wanted to make Tony my own, determined to bring the character to life with raw ferocity." Once De Niro stepped aside, Pacino took the stage and delivered a performance that was wild, violent, and utterly unforgettable. What seemed like a simple casting decision ultimately created one of cinema's most enduring legends. Thanks to De Niro's refusal, Scarface found its immortal Tony Montana. Number 9. Michelle Pfeiffer survived on soup and cigarettes. At the Tribeca Film Festival's 35th anniversary screening of Scarface, Michelle Pfeiffer was asked a seemingly innocent question. "How much did you weigh back then?" Her answer revealed a chilling truth about the production. To embody Elvira Hancock, the cold, drug-ravaged trophy wife of Tony Montana, Pfeiffer starved herself into a ghostly figure, surviving for months on tomato soup and Marlboro cigarettes. It wasn't just acting. It was deliberate self-destruction. Pfeiffer admitted she wanted Elvira's body to deteriorate on screen so that audiences could feel the corrosive effects of cocaine. Throughout the 6-month shoot, her frame withered to the point where her co-stars pitied her and often tried to sneak her real food. She refused every time, insisting on preserving Elvira's downward spiral in perfect sync with her character's collapse. On set, her hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, and trembling hands painted a portrait of decay so real it became painful to watch. Michelle Pfeiffer didn't just play Elvira. She lived her unraveling. It was a fearless gamble that carved her performance deep into cinema history. Do you find this performance unforgettable? Share your thoughts below. Now, let's move on to another shocking fact about Scarface. Number 8. Oliver Stone wrote the script while battling cocaine addiction. Oliver Stone, a brilliant screenwriter known for Midnight Express, 1978, which won him an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay, spent much of the 1970s and early 1980s battling cocaine addiction. He later admitted in a 2003 interview that cocaine had defeated him, wrecking both his health and his creative output. When Stone was first invited to write the screenplay for Scarface, 1983, he had little interest. But after discussions with director Sidney Lumet, he saw the potential in shifting the narrative from Prohibition-era bootlegging to the modern cocaine epidemic in America. Determined to tackle the project, Stone realized he needed to quit cocaine. He exiled himself to Paris, cut ties with Los Angeles, and started a new life. There, he wrote the Scarface script, insisting that raw honesty was better. Cocaine destroys brain cells, and my writing was becoming shallow. Stone drew heavily on his own life for the character of Tony Montana. He admitted that several scenes, especially the hotel sequence, were inspired by his personal experiences. Writing Scarface became his revenge against the very drug that nearly ruined him, making the script not just authentic, but painfully personal. Number 7. John Travolta, almost played. Manny John Travolta was once considered for the role of Manny Ribera, Tony Montana's loyal friend and right-hand man. However, the part ultimately went to Stephen Bauer without even an audition, thanks to his authentic look and natural performance. Stephen Bauer, born Esteban Ernesto Echeverria Sampson, was Cuban-American and the only principal cast member with Cuban heritage. Though he had prior acting credits, Scarface became the turning point in his career. His portrayal of Manny Ribera earned him a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Meanwhile, John Travolta, though passed over for Manny, went on to enjoy an illustrious career with iconic roles in Saturday Night Fever, 1977, Grease, 1978, and Pulp Fiction, 1994. Even without Scarface, Travolta remained tied to the legacy of Hollywood's greatest classics. What do you think? Was Stephen Bauer the perfect choice for Manny? Share your thoughts, and let's keep exploring the untold secrets of Scarface. Number 6. Sidney Lumet was the original director. At first, Sidney Lumet, the acclaimed director of Dog Day Afternoon and 12 Angry Men, was set to direct Scarface, 1983. Lumet suggested the idea of portraying Tony Montana as a Cuban immigrant during the 1980 Mariel boatlift crisis, intending to reflect the realities of immigration and crime in America. However, after working with screenwriter Oliver Stone, Lumet and producer Martin Bregman realized their artistic visions clashed. Lumet wanted a politically charged film criticizing the Reagan administration's role in the cocaine influx, while Bregman envisioned something more entertaining. As a result, Lumet stepped away, and Brian De Palma was brought in to replace him. De Palma gave Scarface a distinct identity. Al Pacino, who played Tony Montana, remarked, "De Palma had a vision unlike anything I had imagined. He brought a clarity to the film. He knew exactly what he wanted from the start." De Palma focused on the brutality and ambition of Tony, crafting a film drenched in style and raw emotion. Number 5. Scarface, 1983, was not the original. Did you know that Brian De Palma's blood-soaked masterpiece wasn't the first Scarface? Over 50 years earlier, in 1932, Howard Hawks and screenwriter Ben Hecht created the original Scarface, inspired by the life of infamous gangster Al Capone. That black-and-white classic, centered on Tony Camonte, planted the seed for what would become a cultural legend. Al Pacino, after stumbling upon the 1932 version, became obsessed. He immediately called producer Martin Bregman, determined to revive the story in a more intense, brutal form. From that spark, Tony Montana was born. When De Palma took over, he transformed the concept into a cinematic nightmare, honoring the original while forging a completely new myth. Yet he never forgot its roots. At the end credits, a tribute appears. This film is dedicated to Howard Hawks and Ben Hecht. It was De Palma's way of bowing to the past while conquering the future. Number 4. 20 years of failed remakes. Scarface became a cultural landmark, but every attempt to remake or continue it over the past 2 decades has collapsed. In the early 2000s, rapper Cuban Link tried to develop a sequel titled Son of Tony, focusing on Tony Montana's son. Though fans were intrigued, rights issues and creative disputes buried the project. Later, acclaimed directors like David Yates, David Ayer, and Pablo Larraín were all linked to new versions. But each attempt stalled, whether from script problems, budget disputes, or creative conflicts. Director Antoine Fuqua came closest in 2018 with a version centered on a Mexican immigrant, but that too unraveled. Most recently, Luca Guadagnino and the Coen brothers were attached, only for Guadagnino to officially step away at the end of 2023. These repeated failures prove just how heavy Scarface's shadow looms. The original isn't just the tale of Tony Montana, it's the embodiment of ambition, violence, and the corrupted American dream. Every remake attempt has been crushed under the weight of the 1983 classic, reminding Hollywood that true legends cannot be duplicated. Number 3. Tony Montana was inspired by a football legend. A little-known fact, the name Tony Montana came from an unlikely source, Joe Montana, the legendary American football quarterback admired by screenwriter Oliver Stone. A die-hard fan of the San Francisco 49ers, Stone combined Joe Montana's surname with Tony, taken from Tony Camonte of the 1932 Scarface, to create the now iconic name. Another fun detail, although the film is titled Scarface, The character Tony Montana is only called Scarface once, and in Spanish. In that scene, Colombian gangster Hector calls him Cara Cicatriz, which translates to Scarface. Number 2. An unscripted scene. The improvised moment between Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer at the Cadillac dealership became one of the film's most memorable scenes precisely because it wasn't in the script. While Elvira Hancock was looking away, Tony Montana slyly put on her hat, creating a moment that was both humorous and natural. Pfeiffer's surprise and delight were genuine, not acted, and she seamlessly stayed in character, making the scene feel more alive and authentic. Director Brian De Palma decided to keep this unscripted moment in the final cut. He believed it naturally expressed the chemistry between Tony and Elvira, adding depth to their relationship. This scene, absent from the original script, stands as a perfect example of how spontaneous moments can elevate the emotional impact of a film. Number 1. A hip-hop cultural icon. Did you know that upon release, Scarface was drowned in criticism and only barely broke even at the box office? But that was just the surface. Once the theatre lights dimmed, the film began its second life, circulating through VHS tapes on the streets. In the dim rooms of American ghettos, Tony Montana was reborn. The image of a Cuban immigrant rising from nothing to become a drug kingpin turned into an underground symbol, a manual for those chasing power in a world of violence and injustice. Scarface stopped being just a movie. It became a secret fire blazing within popular culture. It was the hip-hop community that fanned that flame. When Scarface infiltrated rap culture, it was embraced as a street Bible. Jay-Z, Nas, Notorious B.I.G., Snoop Dogg, all saw themselves in Tony Montana, a risk-taker, willing to bet everything to reach the top. Nas titled his classic track, "The World Is Yours," after the glowing sign in Tony's mansion. Future launched his career with Tony Montana. Biggie bluntly rapped, "Never get high on your own supply." Tony's lines became mantras for an entire generation of rappers, embedding Scarface into the very heartbeat of hip-hop. From there, the film spread beyond music, embedding itself in every corner of culture. Tony Montana posters covered college dorm walls, t-shirts with Pacino's face sold on street corners, video games like Grand Theft Auto, Vice City borrowed its DNA, and even The Simpsons, South Park, and Breaking Bad paid homage. The deeper reason Scarface endures is because Tony Montana is the perfect paradox, a villain transformed into a ghetto superhero. People of colour, immigrants, and youth raised in poverty saw in Tony a distorted but relatable version of the American dream. And so, we've uncovered the 20 most fascinating facts about Scarface. This isn't just a movie, it's an emblem of ruthlessness, ambition, and the corrupted American dream. Have you ever wondered how Scarface might have turned out if Robert De Niro had played Tony? Or whether the shocking violence is truly what made the film a cinematic monument? Share your thoughts below, and let's discuss. After more than 40 years, Scarface still holds its legendary power. If you enjoyed these hidden truths about Scarface and want to discover more untold secrets behind other classic films, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next video.